This cube represents the limits of space the word editor hammer offers you to build your map for any source game. These limits are consistent throughout all source games, regardless of if you make a map for CSS, CSGO, Team Fortress 2, Garry's Mod, or even CS2. This cube is your limit, if you like it or not. So let's see how maps are using the space so far. Of the 32,768 hammer units that are available in all directions, DE Dust 2, for example, measures just short of 8,500 units in length, 7,750 units in width, and almost 1,500 units in height. Mathematically speaking, it uses very little of the available space. This remains true for all the competitive maps. You can say a lot of not so great things about the current state of Counter-Strike or Valve, but the CS maps are by far the most balanced maps any shooter ever had to offer. They reflect years of perfectionism that went into them, and have every little detail tuned to give the best competitive experience within the settings. And with little time per round and standard walking as the fastest way to move through the map sizes are exactly as big as they should be. By the way, this and every map that we will look at will not include the 3D skybox. A 3D skybox is also made on the grid, but in-game a camera then projects it, scaled by a certain factor you determine in Hammer, that can make your map look much bigger, and on most maps is used for the background. The community mappers made amazing use of skyboxes with seamless connections to the playable area, but since the projected size can easily exceed the grid size and the actual geometry is not bigger than the grid and also not playable, I think it makes the most sense to leave all 3D skyboxes out entirely. Let's check out some other game modes. Community-made game modes have different objectives, and for them, bigger can actually mean better. Finding large yet easy to recognize maps for all of these mods wasn't easy, as I'm only a surfer who never played Jailbreak or Zombie Escape, Death Run, Trikz or Rocket Jump, and I only spent exactly 54 minutes b-hopping on some random Russian server that happens to have b-hop Arcane on it back in 2015. So I asked around in some of these communities for big and famous maps. I asked for the equivalent of Surf LT Omnific, but I don't think that really helped. Talking of which, surf maps are incredibly enormous and are actually limited by the hammer limits, since you move so fast through the map that you run out of space really quick. That's why long maps are very convoluted within the grid, to make most out of the space available. I talked about the sheer enormousness of surf ramps and maps in my previous video, so let's move on. Another game mode with potentially huge maps is Jailbreak. Some players are prisoners and others are guards, and you win by escaping or not letting people escape. I'm sorry, I've never played it, and since Jailbreak is pretty much dead and Valve made it impossible to go through the workshop for CSGO without direct links, it was really hard to find maps here. I used Game Banana, and I hope the maps somewhat represent the bigger and more popular Jailbreak maps. This, for example, is JB Clouds. I singled it out initially because I thought it didn't have jail cells, but while making the recordings of this video, it turns out that I'm just an idiot. Anyway, these maps are very beautiful, but besides JB Bloodbath, they are not really big. That makes sense, since they also use real-life scale, just as the competitive maps do. With the incredible amount of detail in Bloodbath, I think it's time to tell you a secret. Almost no map is limited by the grid size, really. Only surf maps has to fight with it, and only on the really big ones. The grid is huge, and that's why Valve didn't feel the need to increase it for CS2. It's simply not a limiting factor, but everything else is. And I mean everything. Hammer imposes limits on everything else, including brushes and brush sides and models, faces on single brushes, planes, text data, and so on and so on. Let's say you want to make a forest. Have a tree model, but not too many vertices, please. Same for shrubs and flowers. A pond only renders correctly if all the water is on one height level. Now scattering the objects throughout the scene, but behave yourself. Add some particles to give it a bit more life. Volumes, please. All that contributes to this very unique, let's say sinister feeling source maps have, but it also hinders the community significantly in the map making process. That is what you have to live with when making maps in a 20-year-old engine. But we shouldn't act like Source hasn't been outdated for at least 10 years now, and the community mappers really pushed the engine to the absolute limits and beyond what it ever was designed to do. Understanding just how terrible the Hammer editor is, and this was just a very small glimpse into it, makes you appreciate even more the community-made maps that are able, against all of Hammer's efforts, to fill big areas with incredible details, look great, or are able to encapsulate a feeling unmatched by any other of the thousands of custom maps. With Source 2 now released, it might feel like a quantum leap within the Source world, but compared to other current engines, free and proprietary, it is obvious that Source 2 at release was already far behind. And my prediction is that it will not be used outside the Valve universe, which I include Sandbox in, whatsoever. And with all the technical problems for map makers and porters, Source 2 might even kill most of our Source communities. Let's go back to the grid limits cube. Under my last video about surf map sizes, someone commented, oh, let's wait till he learns about the zombie escape maps. And I thought that it would definitely be interesting to see, but that the author was very optimistic about the size comparison. But as someone who has never even played a single round of Zombie Escape, I had no idea what a zombie map even looks like. Searching for help, I went to the GFL Zombie Escape Discord and asked for some big and nice maps. I loaded them into the limit cube and I couldn't believe my eyes, just how absolutely massive they were. The level of detail, the ingenuity, and simply the sheer size caught me completely off guard. To be fair, I think the average surf is still bigger than the average zombie escape map, but it's still incredible what the mappers achieved here. Lord of the Rings Minas Tirith, why not the biggest zombie escape map, impressed me the most because it looks so amazing. These 2D hordes at the foot of the mountain to give the feeling of a siege, that's incredible. On the other hand, the smallest maps, to nobody's surprise, next to these warm-up mini-maps from CSGO, are AIM maps and Gary's mod prop hunt maps. Here, limited space is necessary. Imagine having hundreds of props on a big-ass map. That makes just as little sense as having an AIM match, where you must run around to find the other player for 3 minutes. Bhop has mostly somewhat small maps, because for the most part you don't reach the speed like you do in Surf, and even if you do, it takes a lot longer to build up to that speed. There are some heavy hitters though, like Bhop Epiphany 1 and 2. TF2's rocket jump maps are bigger than that. But even some of the official maps are enormous compared to Counter-Strike's competitive maps. I think the reason is pretty obviously that the TF2 gameplay and movement is much faster, and also the comic look doesn't require a lot of details in order to look good. The game mode Trikz, where you jump on your mate's head to gain height and speed, actually surprised me. I imagined them being much bigger. Maps with multiple minute world records are still not as big as surf maps with shorter records. I guess it's that making long maps is difficult. Mapping in general for Trikz might be very difficult since you cannot really test the jumps alone. I don't know. I thought they were bigger. But I do think that Trikz, even though it's that niche, has some of the best looking maps in the whole game. Very talented people mapping over there. Climb maps can be very long to beat, even the world records are sometimes very long. But because of so much vertical movement in them, the climbing part, they do not take much space on the grid, in general. To bring this whole thing to an end here, Valve, please fix CS2, so that the incredible communities can give us the next generation of amazing maps. You're not only killing the main game, that honestly I couldn't give less fuck about, but also communities that hundreds and thousands of people have built over years and years. Make CSGO its own game with its own Steam app ID, so people's maps, where they put so much work in, can be browsed in the workshop and played in-game again, without all the warnings that the game is discontinued. You discontinued any support for TF2 ages ago, and don't bother people over there with this bullshit. That's it for me. Here are some more maps I had laying around. I hope you liked it. See you. Bye.